Good morning. I'm Senator Bernie Sanders, the ranking member of the Budget Committee here in the Senate, and I'm surrounded by all these illustrious members of the Senate and the House leadership. And we're going to try to convince you that what is in the Republican budget is for real, that they're not kidding. And one of the problems that I always have with this is when we tell the American people what is actually in the budget, they say, no, you're being partisan, you're not being real, this can't be true. And the media sometimes says, this is so absurd, we're not even going to discuss this stuff. So let's talk about what really is in the budget. And if my Republican friends disagree with me, I hope they'll come out on the floor and tell us where we're wrong. Right now, the United States is the only country in the industrialized world that doesn't guarantee health care to all people. In the last number of years, we have made some progress in providing health care to many millions of Americans. So what does the Republican budget do? The Republican budget eliminates the Affordable Care Act. That tosses 16 million Americans off of health care. 16 million. But apparently that is not enough. The Republican budget makes massive cuts, over $400 billion in Medicaid, throws another 11 million Americans off of health insurance. 16 plus 11 equals 27 million Americans suddenly thrown off of health insurance. Is there anybody in the United States of America who thinks that this makes any sense at all to throw 27 million Americans off of health insurance? Well, that is exactly what the Republican budget does. In the state of Vermont, and I expect every state represented here, young people are struggling to figure out a way they can afford to go to college. Huge problem. And for those young people who graduate college, they are stuck with these oppressive debts around their neck, which they carry for decades. The Republican budget responds to this crisis, this is true, by cutting mandatory Pell Grants by almost $90 billion over a 10-year period, increasing the cost of college education for more than 8 million Americans. That's their response to the crisis of higher education. Tragically, in this country, we have over 40 million people living in poverty. Many of them are struggling to figure out how we put food on the table. How are they going to feed their kids? Republican budget makes massive cuts in nutrition programs for some of the poorest people in this country, increasing hunger. Those are the priorities in the Republican budget. But there is one area where they have been very sacred and consistent about, is that while millions of people are struggling with health care, with education, putting food on the table, the wealthiest people and the largest corporations are doing phenomenally well. And the Republicans have been absolutely consistent, almost with a religious belief. They will not ask the billionaires, they will not ask profitable corporations to pay one nickel more in taxes. Their intention is to balance the budget on the backs of the elderly, the children, the sick, and the poor. Needless to say, our view of what the American people want and what the American people need is a very different view. Our view is to say that we are on the side of the middle class, we are on the side of working families, and we do believe that when the rich get much richer and corporations in some cases pay zero in federal income tax, yes, they are going to have to pay a little bit more. And with that, I now want to introduce Representative Chris Van Hollen, who has been doing a great job as the ranking member of the Budget Committee in the House.